Cruising account Richard von Coudenhove Kalergi. Today is Saturday 11th of June, a nice sunny, very breezy 17.5 degrees. And here's a couple of comments since my last video. Another addition to the Irish attending Bilderberg last week was Thomas Byrne, State for European Affairs, a title I haven't heard before. Just an observation during the week. I had an interesting aircraft fly overhead. It was an Antonov 12 and it's belonging to an airline called Kavok Air, which fly unusual sized engineering equipment, and the aircraft was actually 51 years old and was part of a fleet of 11 aircraft. Now what caught me was the fact that it's a Russian aircraft, but it's actually flown by a company based in the Ukraine, and the word Kavok, C-A-V-O-K, is an abbreviation for cloud and vision. Okay, lovely aircraft it is too, big beautiful engines, flying at 24,000 feet, heading down towards Shannon. Now the road we're driving on now is the British Road, going from Firhouse up towards British and then on to Blessington, and the Glenasmole waterfall, Glenasmole reservoir is into our left there. Quite a narrow little bridge here, but just a couple of things there during the week as a follow-up to that story in Spain, where the release of information regarding those that had paid for their vaccine cert. The list now includes a Dr. Sousa Faro, who was president of a pharma giant, Faramar, and he's been charged with being a false vaccinated cert. Would be very interesting to see. This list also includes a footballer, a sports personality, an actress, and other famous Spanish celebrities. But amazing to think that thousands of people paid to have themselves put on an immunisation register that they weren't entitled to. Now, unfortunately, the figures so far from Europe regarding vaccine injuries is that there's 4,416,778 injuries and 45,316 dead, and they've now come up with this sudden adult death syndrome. Personally, I think it should be sudden loss of common sense syndrome, as the only thing that's changed within that time frame is the amount of young people. And now it turns out, not that I'm a fan, but Justin Bieber has now come out with some facial paralysis along with his wife, who had a stroke recently. In Australia, a personality known as Mr. Bondi, who was arrested on April the 19th last year and charged with being outside his area, and he took a case against the state for wrongful arrest. The charges were eventually dropped against him, and the authorities had agreed to pay his legal fees, and he said no. He went a bit further with this, so took a case against the authorities and actually won and got a settlement of 90,000 Australian dollars was agreed. And he said a quote which I thought was very good. He says, "We are vaccinated with the blood of God." During the week I had a couple of chats, very interesting network chats. One was a lady who worked in a hospital in Galway, was telling me that her 26-year-old brother, after getting the second jab, played a hurling match, and 12 hours later he collapsed at home and had to be rushed to hospital in the family car. And when admitted to hospital, he brought it to the attention that he had been vaccinated 12 hours previously, and the doctors really didn't pay any attention to this. And she was very annoyed, this particular nurse, very nice lady, was very annoyed with the protocols regarding the COVID, and she said that the crisis in the HSE was that nurses who had tested positive without showing symptoms were sent home, which was placing unnecessary burden then on the other staff. And the other lady I met was a lady who spent 27 years living in Australia. When she returned to Ireland 8 years ago, she said there was no facility to help her return. She was treated as a first-time driver, even though she hadn't one penalty point when driving abroad, and her work experience was, she was told when she presented her credentials that, no, that's outside the EU. So this is the kind of nonsense that effectively are anti-Irish policies towards people who try to return to Ireland. So I mentioned to her that there were 79 different NGOs dealing with racism in Ireland, and not one NGO that had been set up to help returning Irish return to Ireland, and was that this not racist towards Irish people. And I have to say, she agreed with me, but we had a very nice chat. And during the course of the chat, it came up that she said that her mother, her aging mother, had a housekeeper from the Ukraine, and this lady had been her housekeeper for over 20 years, and had mentioned that the housekeeper's daughter came to Ireland with her family and children and got a house within 2 weeks of arrival in Ireland. So this is the kind of stuff that's going on behind the scenes, which you know, if you consider the levels of homelessness in this country already, it's quite extraordinary that housing can be found so quickly, you know. And also a nice quote I saw from Dara Flaherty was, he says, in the cashless society, digital ID, it all sounds a bit like tyranny to me. I think that's very catchy, could be a new go-to phrase. And also, there was a report there recently said that up to 3 billion face masks could be in the oceans, and that it could take up to 450 years for these to dissolve. And that's roughly 1.29 billion masks are created a month, and 3 million masks per minute are actually thrown away. Now in South Africa, Aspen were going to produce the Johnson & Johnson vaccine under licence, and was open to much fanfare in January by Cyril Ramaphosa, and that facility is now shut down due to the lack of uptake, and they were in a position to produce up to 200 million vaccines a year, and they're now going back to producing anaesthetics, which they had done. And also in relation to the Ukraine, interestingly, Macron came out this week, said that they should not humiliate Putin, and I think the danger is now that it was believed that the Ukrainian forces are losing anywhere up to 200 troops a day, which is a tragic figure. And also that the suggestion of providing longer range weapons to the Ukrainians would mean that the Russians would just push further then into the land in the Ukraine, which I think is actually making a bad situation actually worse. And from a Russian point of view, giving them the reason to actually go further into Ukraine. And also I'd like to take a little shout out there to a couple of people. Emmanuel, it was great to see you yesterday. You're quite an artist, and thanks for the painting. The music I have on today is from a film called The Big Blue, which is one of my favourite, and the music is by a gentleman called Eric Serra. And I'd like to also shout out to Darius K last week, who pointed out the music was from Gabriel Yard and recommended a movie called The Lives of Others, and the music to that is by a fella called Gabriel Yard. And I'm familiar with the film Darius. It's a very good movie, and I like the leading actor. Is an actor called Sebastian Kosh, I think his name, and also Irish Rose. Nice to see you putting out stuff. Nice to see you back in YouTube again. So there are a couple of comments which are my own. I think I'll just let out the music play out for a little bit longer. And it's a great movie, The Big Blue. It stars a chap called what the hell is his name now? It's just off. He was Enzo, the character. Leon. He was in Leon as well. And well, that's annoying me now. Fantastic actor. He was in a couple of other movies directed by Luc Besson, I think, starting with Subway. He was also in Ronin, and he's a French-Moroccan actor. The thoughts have slipped my mind. But yeah, fabulous film, well worth looking at it, and I found it in the Telegram channel, which is called The Archive. But alright, there are a couple of thoughts which are my own. Thanks very much for listening. Good afternoon, good luck, and God bless.